Dear Lord, we ask your blessing upon this board, this port, and the people who depend upon it. We ask that you guide this board in their decisions tonight, that they are for the betterment of those that we serve. In your name, amen. Amen. Mr. Dixon, lead us in the pledge.
Put your hand over your heart and face the flag and say with us, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board encourages public comment and questions regarding all agenda items. Persons wishing to do so should complete a speaker's card, which is at the entrance to the boardroom. When speaking or asking a question on an agenda item, one should, in addition to completing the card, come to the microphone, be recognized, provide your name, address, and phone number. Comments by individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. The first item is the approval of the May 24th, 2021 regular meeting minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
Mr. Easton moves, Mr. Lorenzi second. Any question, discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carried. Submission 2021-023, proven Board of Commission election of officers.
Mr. President, I have a motion to make. I'd like to start our rotation as we normally do, or continue our rotation as we normally do. That would be putting Mr. Lorenzo as our president, Mr. Prudhomme as our vice president. Put Judy Cleary as our secretary treasurer, and Mike Easton as our, I guess, the vice. Well, it won't be vice, assistant secretary treasurer.
Can I make another motion?
Well, it's a nomination, as I appreciate it. Right, John? And nominations don't require a second?
That's correct.
Okay. So we have a nomination from Mr. Dixon, from Mr. Lorenzi as president, Mr. Prudhomme as vice president, Ms. McClary, secretary treasurer, Mr. Easton, assistant secretary. Are there any other nominations?
Yeah, I'd like to make a nomination that we continue with the current board of officers that we have. Based on everything that's been going on, I think that you guys have been focused on a lot of things that most of us don't take a look at. So that would be my nomination.
So your nomination is
To continue with the current officers.
Current officers continue as seated. So that would be myself as president, Mr. Lorenzi as vice president, Mr. Prudhomme as secretary treasurer, and Ms. McClary as assistant secretary treasurer.
I have a point of question. Is this been typically the case? Being new to the board, I'm just wondering whether or not this is generally how the board has functioned over the last, say, decade?
I can't speak to the past decade. Some people who've been around a little bit longer than I have can, but the bylaws allow for a commissioner to serve no more than 2 consecutive years in a particular office. So it is allowed. As far as since I've been here, it's changed every year, but that's just since I've been here.
I would say in the last 10 years, it has not been the case where one person served in the same office for more than 1 year in the last decade.
But the bylaws provide for it, for 2 terms.
They do.
Okay.
You know,
It says no
in my
more.
9 years that I've been on the board, it has rotated the same as every other public body in this area has rotated through the years. And it's just to bring new leadership into a position, you know, because everybody has different leadership goals they're trying to accomplish. And that's why the rotation occurs in virtually every public body that we have.
And that gives everybody a chance to serve as president or any of the office that we have in here. If you do not want to serve, it doesn't mean you have to serve. It just means you can opt out and it just move rotation up that much further. So And I think that's the easiest route to go, where there's no problems with trying to do that. It gives everybody that opportunity.
Okay, is there any other nominations?
No nomination, but I would prefer to opt out from nomination as president.
Well, in that
Okay,
case,
so-
it's my nomination. I would nominate Mr. Prudhomme to take the place of president, and we would just move right on.
Yeah, I think you can only make one nomination, Mr. Dixon, so you've already nominated Mr. Lorenzi for president, Mr.
Okay.
Prudhomme vice
I'll
president.
offer a second
I
slate.
appreciate what
Yeah.
you're doing,
Yeah.
but,
I think you're quite capable of handling.
I don't, that's not the issue that, I think with everything that's going on right now, I think continuity is important candidly, and I just don't feel like I have the time to devote to it with my own personal recovery from these storms, you know, plus my practice. I just don't feel right doing it.
Okay, well, I guess since Mr. Dixon's nominations was first, we'll vote on the slate of officers as nominated by Mr. Dixon, which would be Mr. Lorenzi, President, Mr. Prudhomme, Vice President, Ms. McClary, Secretary Treasurer,
I
Mr.
should be able to withdraw.
So,
Yeah, so I think since he's stated his decision to opt out, I would think Mr. Dixon would have the opportunity to withdraw his nomination if he so chooses. I mean, or we could vote on it, but it would be kind of neither here nor there since.
And then we could
Well,
offer a
in that
substitution.
question, if I withdraw because Mr. Lorenzo has decided not to take that position, do I get to make another nomination?
There's no prohibition on that,
Okay.
but
All right.
that's the pleasure of the board, you know.
Okay, then I'll withdraw that nomination and offer an alternate. And
Okay,
that would
Mr.
be-
Dixon withdraws his nomination.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have Mr. Prudhomme as the president. I would have Ms. Judy McClary as the vice president. I would have Mike Eason as the secretary treasurer, and I would offer David Darbone or myself as the assistant treasurer.
Okay, so your nomination now is Mr. Prudhomme for president, Ms. McClary for vice president, Mr. Eason for secretary treasurer, and Mr. Darbone for assistant secretary treasurer. Is that your nomination?
Yes.
Okay, is there any other nominations? Okay, no other nominations, then we'll vote on Mr. Dixon's slate of officers. I guess we should do a voice vote. Roll call. So this is for the slate of officers of Mr. Prudhomme, President, Ms. McClary, Vice President, Mr. Eason, Secretary Treasurer, and Mr. Darbone, Assistant Secretary Treasurer. Yes, ma'am.
yes,
Yes.
No.
No.
No. No.
Yes.
Okay, so the nomination fails. The current nomination by Mr. Darbone of Mr. Crelo as president, Mr. Lorenzi as vice president, Mr. Prudhomme as secretary treasurer, and Ms. McClary as assistant secretary treasurer. Do we have to vote, or is it adopted by failure of the other?
No, I think there needs to be a vote.
Okay, well then we'll take a roll call vote on that.
no,
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Okay, so the current slate of officers will serve one more term. Next is submission 2021-024, authorizing ground lease with Driftwood LNG. Mr. Self?
And we're really excited to announce that Driftwood LNG is interested in moving forward with a long-term agreement at a 477-acre site that we have on the west side of the ship channel. It's the prior global industry site that we acquired years ago. In 2016, you may recall that they entered into a short-term agreement. That short-term agreement contemplated a long-term LNG export project, and it included land rent plus a throughput. During construction, the land rent would generate about $1.8 million. It would generate about $2.4 million once they go into commercial operation. And with trains 1 through 4, the throughput will be about $686,000 a year. So we're really excited about it. Good project for Southwest Louisiana. $16.8 billion, over 6,500 jobs, construction jobs, 400 permanent jobs. Just outstanding for Southwest Louisiana.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion on submission 2021-24, authorizing ground lease with Driftwood LNG LLC.
Okay, Mr. Darbone moves, and Mr. Lorenzi seconds submission 2021-024. Any discussion?
Mr. President, if I may, I believe Ms. Heather Hohensee with Tellurian is here and present and would like to say a few words about the project, if that's at the pleasure of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, yes, I'm Heather Hohensee, the Director of Government and Public Affairs with Tellurian. Our offices are based in Houston, but actually live here in the Southwest Louisiana area. So it's a pleasure to be here this evening and representing Tellurian, but really just to be here and say thank you. First off, I want to commend the port team and the Port of Commissioners. Every time I attend a port presentation, usually one of Channing's, I'm always impressed to remember that you are managing and running one of the largest ports in the U.S. in terms of tonnage. And by doing this, you're ensuring that our community, Southwest Louisiana, plays an important part in international trade and also ensuring that an economic driver for our community remains viable. And so the work that you all do is very important. And again, just want to commend you for that. Tellurian leadership and the project team also want to thank you so much for the support that you have demonstrated for the Driftwood project since its early development. Your support is very important to the success of this project, and we're very excited for this option to be approved this evening and for the project to continue to move forward. Tellurian, we're excited to be part of this community. We recognize that it's our role here to be a good neighbor, and we just want to reemphasize that we are committed to being an economic driver for the community, but also investing in the community and improving the quality of life for everyone. Since our inception, we've invested over $2 million in the local community in terms of important infrastructure investments, as well as the recent hurricane relief efforts. And we're committed to continuing to do that, and we thank you for your welcoming into the community and allowing us to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No further questions. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carried. Submission 2021-025, authorizing executive director to enter into a third amended lease agreement with Shaw Modular Solutions. Mr. Self?
Yes, this lease is for an area of a 3-acre site near the turning basin that is currently leased by Shaw Industries, and it would provide, if it's approved, would allow the use of the dock for other purposes other than just Shaw.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we table this item and defer it to a later date.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to table submission 2021-25, and would all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Let's do a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
No. No.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to table fails. Mr. Lorenzi had made a motion to accept. I need a second.
I second.
Mr. Darbone, second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have some questions. I guess my first question is, I'm concerned about an open-ended item that we have here on the agenda. I don't know really enough information as far as what may or may not occur here, what kind of opportunities would occur that are beneficial to the port. And as much as anything, you know, to my knowledge, I don't know if we've ever done this before, as far as allowing what I would call a sublease of an existing lease of a Fortune 500 company. I think it's something that needs to be addressed and looked at from 360 degrees, because I think you're opening a door to the future that you may not want to open. And I think that's something that we have to take a look at as to what impact it could have to this port down the road. I think it's important for us to know all the moving parts.
I think your concern may be with what any individual use of the lease may be, but to the extent that you have the option to have that lease in place, then your concerns can be addressed as to any possible exercise of that lease. But if we, when we have the option of having that put into commerce, I think we need to take advantage of it. So, you know, when opportunity strikes, I think we need to take that opportunity and lock it in. I mean, obviously that Fortune 500 company has signed and they're willing to do it. So,
Well, I guess I would add,
you don't lose that opportunity.
what I would add is this is the turning basin, which, as I understand it, at this port is a very, very valuable piece of property. And we've got a lot of property, we have a lot of property at this port that's available for lease. I'm not so, I'm trying to understand why this particular piece of property is so important to open that door with. I think it's something that we've got to take a look at closely. And, you know, I guess the million-dollar question, if somebody does want to sublease that, are they going to have to come before this board for approval?
If it depends on the terms of the lease, the current delegation of authority would allow the executive director to lease a piece of property up to a year without board authority. Anything longer than that, it would require board authority to do so. And I think there's a dollar amount, that threshold.
Correct.
Yeah.
And my understanding is more of a month-to-month deal where you would put Shaw on notice that you need it for a particular project, and then if Shaw needed it, they would come back to the port and say, we need it back at such and such a date, and you relinquish it.
Yeah, the lease allows the port to access the dock with prior notice to Shaw. I believe it's 30 days prior notice.
And my understanding, this is a dock that basically really hadn't been used in 15 years and developed no revenue, no income, no jobs for the port. And this puts the port in the position of having access to that for whatever business may come along. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the number of years that it hasn't been active, but
Right.
in response to your question, if the board chooses, I would be willing to, delegate that back to the board if y'all want to vote on whether or not we should go down that road on any agreements.
Yeah, because I would assume you would be indemnifying Shaw whenever they would sublease it to whoever that third party is. I think it's important for us to do a proper due diligence on any potential new customer.
Okay.
Are you
That's-
asking for us to study this? Is that what?
No, it's discussion.
Discussion.
Just
No,
discussion.
I mean, I would hope that
the study, Mr. Easton is talking about us holding off on this to get an idea.
Yeah, that got voted down.
That got-
That was his original motion that was failed. Correct.
So now we're discussing the actual motion of entering into the modified lease.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, What I'm saying
You would
now
hope
is
due
if anybody wants
diligence
to
would
come
be
before
done
this,
at any, on everything.
I mean, if anybody wants to come before this board for a sublease, I'd like the opportunity to do some due diligence on who this is.
what provisions, as you've drafted it, is there for further board action on what we are voting on? Or is it then a month-to-month decision by the staff?
It would be dependent upon the proposed project for that site.
Right, the current amendment to the Shaw lease doesn't contemplate any term or approval requirements for any third-party lease.
For
It just,
their personal use?
between us and Shaw, allows us access to the dock with prior notice. That's as simply as I can state it, what's in the amendment.
But I guess in response to Mr. Easton's question, I would be willing to, the board could vote on whether or not they want to enter into that agreement.
And so-
Whatever agreement that may be.
And so, but that would not come back to the board. So if ABC Company wants to ship something using that dock, this would allow them, regardless of what that cargo is, with no impact financially to the port. I'm just trying to find out, once we approve this,
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna,
what
unfortunately,
exactly
it's very
we will
general
be
in
agreeing
form,
to.
and it doesn't go into the specifics of what a rate may or may not be for a specific project.
That's my concern.
My understanding is that the executive director can enter into up to a one-year lease with someone without coming to the board. What Mr. Self is suggesting is that once this is approved, if it's approved, he would bring to the board whoever it would be that would want to lease the site. Is that correct? You're relinquishing your authority under the 1 year
Not on all agreements.
on
To answer your question,
this agreement.
specific to this agreement, what I'm
Specific.
saying to you is that I would be willing to come back to the board at a future date
If you get approached for a use.
if it makes good sense for the, if it's a viable project.
But at that point, the board would vote on that? Or it would be, I've brought this to you because I'm doing it?
What I'm saying
And I
is,
have the authority to do it.
I'm saying the board would vote on it.
That would be perfect.
That is what is in the current item that we're.
No, ma'am.
That is not in there now.
No, ma'am.
I'm just telling you that if the board is interested in doing this amendment to the Turning Basin lease with Shaw, if a company comes along and is interested in leasing or moving project or doing a project at that site, I will send that agreement to you for approval.
So would that be any different than if I have rental property, personal rental property, and I allow someone to sublet it, carte blanche? Is that basically what we are doing here?
No, ma'am. No. So this amendment is just between us and Shaw. It allows us access. Now, if Shaw, let's say the board approves this, we sign the amendment, Shaw signs the amendment. That amends their lease to allow us access to the dock. Then it is up to the port to decide if we want to allow a third party to access the dock. And that would be a separate agreement between us and the third party, or under our general tariff.
And that's what I
So-
would like to come before the board.
And I believe that's what they're saying, is if that happens, Mr. Self will bring that agreement between us and the third party before the board for approval.
And that is part of, that is already incorporated into what we are voting on tonight?
That is not
board
incorporated
would have final
into-
approval?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and so I would offer that amendment, that prior to allow the staff, the executive director, allowing access to that property, allowing us access to, I guess, allow someone else access, if I'm understanding you correctly, the board would have approval of that.
Okay, so I believe we will amend the resolution to,
I'll second the amendment.
Wait, we need to get the language of it.
Yeah,
right, so.
Saying
we-
access.
Right, we will just have to add a line in the resolution. The current resolution just authorizes the executive director to enter into the amendment as stated in the submission. The resolution will then say, we'll add to the resolution the direction that any third-party agreement between the port and a third party for use of this dock will require board approval. It would be as simple as that.
Okay.
That's, yes. simple as
Thank
that.
you, I
Yes,
appreciate
ma'am.
your clarification.
Ms. McClary's amendment, seconded by Mr. Dixon. Any discussion on the amendment?
Michelle, are you okay? Okay.
Any discussion on the amendment? All those, Mr.
Well, I guess what I want to make sure is that what Mr. Self is saying is he understands that is an abrogation of the authority that he otherwise would have, and he's agreeing
Specific to this agreement,
that, okay,
specific
so
to
there's
this
no
agreement.
misunderstanding that he's abrogating that authority.
Just specific to this agreement.
His delegation derives from the board's authority as it stands today. So
Right.
you
No, the
can,
point is that he's not contesting it if it's included in.
I mean,
I'm-
if
I
there are
don't want to get into a
agreements,
situation where the board puts this in the agreement and then at a subsequent date, the director takes the position that is not enforceable because it's in violation
oh, I
of.
see what you're saying.
oh, no. This resolution will trump that. General authority, right? The specific governs over the general.
And I guess the reason that I'm offering that is that we need to be sensitive to other tenants on the turning basin. And so in order to look at this on a case-by-case basis as a board, and certainly on anything else, the staff makes recommendations, and so we would certainly entertain and be interested in staff recommendation. But that would be looking at it from an operations standpoint, from a channel user standpoint, certainly our other tenants, and so that would be why I think that it might be cautious and prudent on the part of the board to look at this on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Would that help, Mr. Easton?
What's that?
Will that help you?
I didn't,
Will that help?
Including this amendment, will that help?
I mean, I would like to see the amendment added to that agenda item. I can't hear it all. I need a hearing aid.
I just want to know what advocate means.
Give up. Give it up.
I mean, basically, all we've amended the motion is to any potential sublease, I'll call it, has to come before the board for approval, is what I was trying to accomplish. I got it.
Any other discussion on the amendment? If there's no other discussion, all those in favor for the amendment, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, the amendment's carried. Back to the original motion to authorizing the executive director to enter into the agreement, third amended lease agreement with Shaw Modular Solution as amended.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I guess it's directed to John. Is there any need now to confer with Shaw based on that amendment? I don't think so.
I don't believe so. I don't believe we're going to alter the amendment as written. The authority to enter into a third-party agreement
Okay.
will be subject to board
All right.
approval.
Just wanted to confirm.
You know, time frame, what are we talking about here? Shaw's ready to do this tomorrow, or?
We don't know. They've seen a draft and provided comments, but we didn't go any farther without board authority.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, the motion as amended? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion as amended is carried. Submission 2021-26, accepting the best value proposal, entering into a contract with Burke's Cirtwell for the procurement of 2 new ship loaders for BT1. Mr. Self?
Yes, as you're aware, Hurricane Laura destroyed 2 of the ship loaders at BT1. In 2018, the state legislature actually passed a statute that allows us to issue an RFP for cranes for specialty cranes, as opposed to going through a kind of a bid process. Nick and his group have gone through that process. They reviewed we initially went out for RFP for the first ship loader, then about 2 months later, went out for the second ship loader. There were some economies of scale by combining the 2 ship loaders under one supplier. And in doing that, they brought in 2 vendors, interviewed them, went through a process of about a day to look at what their proposal was. And the best value proposal that we're requesting authority for is to go with Brooks at a price of $20.2 million for both cranes. It's one is a calcine loader and one is a Petco. And again, this is we're going to get some insurance proceeds from that, and we're also going to request FEMA reimbursement.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve submission 2021-026, accepting the best value proposal and entering into a contract with Brooks for the procurement of 2 new ship loaders for BT1.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Darbone, second by Mr. Dixon to approve submission 2021-26. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. I'm going to deviate from the agenda for a minute. I see Senator Johns has made it to the meeting, so I'm going to ask Ginger, our state lobbyist, to give her report, introduce our legislators that are here, and give each one of them an opportunity to speak. And I'd like to thank you all for everything that you did in this session, not only for the port, but for all of Southwest Louisiana with the recovery and the dollars y'all brought home.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. I won't be long. I'm going to let some of our 3 senators who are here tonight make a couple of comments. But long story short, this was a fiscal session in nature. We generally deal with tax matters, which we had a tax reform package. And at the same time, the federal government announced the American Rescue Plan Act. I'll let them speak for themselves, but I always say our easiest sessions are when we're broke, because there's nothing to fight over. This was one of the most difficult sessions for a number of reasons, not just the tax reform, but the amount of money. Louisiana is going to get $3.2 billion over the next 2 years, so the legislature was tasked this year with appropriating roughly $1.6 billion. I think they ultimately appropriate a billion and some change, and they'll come back next year when the second tranche comes to appropriate that money. Southwest Louisiana did great, and our delegation is to be commended for it. Out of the top, we got $30 million for Southwest Louisiana. Specifically, the Port of Lake Charles got $14 million toward hurricane recovery. In addition, in that same amount of money from the federal government, the administration, with the support of our senators here tonight, allocated $50 million for COVID-related expenses to be reimbursed to port authorities in the state. Port of Lake Charles has a rough estimate of what we did not get reimbursed for, so we'll apply once that portal is open at the Division of Administration. All of the pots of money are in different agencies too. The first is in the Department of Treasury. I know our General Counsel's working on that. The Port Relief Fund is going to be at the Division of Administration. And then we have the Dredge Material Management Program. We were able to amend that on the House side. It was inadvertently left out of the bill as filed, but the state did come up with their $5 million, which is their second-year agreement to our cooperative endeavor agreement to meet the obligations with industry and the port. The directors told me we've already got those funds, so that's good news. Lastly, with regard to capital outlay, Senator Johns on the Senate side was able to get us $500,000 more towards our cranes, so that gives us a total of $3 million. I'll be working with Nick to get to bond commission so that we get a line of credit and get those monies expended. We had a number of other issues. I'm not going to take much time. We have with us Senator Ronnie Johns, our dean of the delegation. We have Senator Mark Abraham, and we have Senator Mike Reese. I think a couple of our House members are on vacation, but I know the 3 of them would like to say a couple of things, and I'm happy to answer any questions, obviously, of staff or the commissioners.
Thank you, Ginger.
Well, thank you, Ginger, and members. of the Port Board, thank you for allowing us to come tonight and share just a few short words with you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for accommodating me. I just drove in from a meeting from Breaux Bridge, and how I didn't get stopped, I don't know, but I think they know that white Yukon out there. So, it was an interesting year, even though it was a short session. There was just so much packed into it, with a lot of money flowing around. Everybody said it must have been easy because there was so much money, and the reality of it was more difficult, especially for Senator Abraham and myself, and Senator Reese that's here, because every time we walked down that hall, somebody was grabbing our suit coat saying, Senator, all I need is another couple of $1 million. And that was the truth. That's the reality of it. But, you know, we put our head together, realizing how much money was out there and realizing the needs of Southwest Louisiana. We put our heads together and created the Southwest Louisiana Disaster Fund, as Ginger said, $30 million. I will tell you, it's the largest single appropriation in the budget for local governments back home, by far. Everybody keeps saying, you know, we know you deserve it, but how did you get that? And it's all about building relationships over there. It's about building a relationship with the leadership of the Senate, with the chairman of the Finance Committee and the Revenue and Fisc Committee, and having the right people in the right places at the right time. So we were pleased to do that. The way that it worked, we asked all of the entities in Southwest Louisiana, what are your needs after FEMA and after your insurance money? What are your unfunded needs? We went to the school board. We went to Chenault. We went to of course, to the port. We went to Sowella, McNeese, the neighboring parishes, Jeff Davis and Beauregard Parish had some needs also. And we took the numbers that y'all gave us, that everybody gave us, and we literally did not pick any favorites. We prorated that money according to the needs that you sent us, and of course the Port of Lake Charles, out of $30 million, is coming home with 14 of that $30 million, because your needs are far greater than anybody else. As Ginger said, we were able to up the money in capital outlay for your mobile cranes. Happy to do that, and hopefully in the port, the $50 million coming to the port from COVID money, that some of your needs are going to be addressed in that also. I will tell you that we're anticipating another windfall of money again next year, and hopefully our delegation is going to be able to participate once again in that. And we actually asked for $60 million, I will tell you that, but we got 30. We were glad to do it. I don't know if you ever seen a dog gnawing a bone, but Senator Abraham, he gets through with a bone, there's not much meat left on it. And I will tell you what a great friend we've got with Senator Reese here. Even though he comes all the way from Leesville, he represents Calcasieu Parish extremely well, even having a small part of it. So Senator Reese, thank you for being a part of our delegation. And Senator Abraham, thank you. So Senator Abraham, you want to say a few words, but thank you for allowing us to represent you in Baton Rouge, and we look forward to continue to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank y'all. Ronnie just about summed it up, except he said that it was divided equally, but what he doesn't know that I skewed the numbers to make sure the port got the most amount of money. So I just, no, that didn't happen. No, it was a group effort, and you know, the relationships that we all have there is very, very important. And we had empathy, I say this all the time, empathy and sympathy for Southwest Louisiana. And that's how we were able to secure these dollars. Now, what we need to do in the future, which is next year and before the session starts, or right when the session starts, we're going to ask the port and McNeese and Sowella to come back again. This time, we want y'all to come to the Senate Finance and to the Appropriations Committee and present to the committee what y'all did with the money, okay, or what you're getting ready to do with the money, and why it was not enough, okay? So I kind of joked with some of the Senate Finance guys. I said, I think in history, John Paul Jones, said, I've just begun to fight, right? So I told them, I said, look, Southwest Louisiana has just begun to fight because we're coming back next year asking for the same amount of money. But it's going to depend on y'all's presentation to me on how efficient that you use this money and how you come across in presenting what you used it for, and why the need is still there, and why the disaster is still there, and you do not have enough of your insurance money and FEMA money to cover it. I think that's going to be big. We're going to ask that of McNeese and Suella, the school boards, and y'all, and I believe that we will be successful in doing that. And again, we cannot do that without the support of all the Southwest delegation. We're all contributed on the House side. They went and saw Clay Schexnayder, which is the Speaker. They presented the same plan, saying trying to get a buy-in from them. And then I know I'm not trying to lift up your lobbyist, Ginger, but really, I mean, she does a remarkable job making sure that we're informed of the needs that you have. And if I'm not mistaken, on the dredge material, we found out that it was not in the budget. And Ginger was calling, well, where's the money? Where's the money? We found out that they left it out. And of course, Ginger thought it was on purpose, but it really was a mistake. But we found that mistake, and we were able to put it back in. So again, we're pleased to present this to you. It's not what I know everybody wanted, but it's still a good pot of money. And don't ever hesitate to call us if y'all need anything explained. And thank y'all again for letting us serve you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll just briefly add to that. I think that Mark and Ronnie were masterful in the way they went after this, and Ginger with her advice along the way. Ronnie maintained such a position of trust in that legislature. I think his ability to relay what our needs were in this community. But really, my hat's off to the management team here at the port and the members of the board, because you really put a lot of effort leading into this session to educate both the administration and members outside of this delegation to the extent of the damage that existed down here. And I think that went a long way to helping other members around the state understand what the true needs here were and the depth of the damage and the extent of the damage that occurred here. But one of my takeaways this session was that we also spent $400 million as a down payment toward flood walls around the New Orleans area that was a result of Hurricane Katrina many, many, many years later. That we came together to support that. And it gives me confidence that this legislature recognizes the long ongoing needs that result from hurricanes of this size, and I have no doubt that they'll continue to support our efforts to rebuild, because it will be a very long-term process. So thank you for the work that you put in to educating our colleagues along the way, and certainly the work that both Ronnie and Mark put in advocating for this area. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Ginger, you have any more? Okay. Thank you all very much. We certainly appreciate all the hard work, and Senator Abraham, keep that calculator that you used this year. Carry it with you next year.
It'll be there. It'll be on there.
Okay, the next item of business is submission 2021-027, proof of loss. Mr. Self.
Yes, we have, as you recall, we received the first partial payment of $24.5 million on our insurance in 2020, and we will anticipate getting once, if you guys approve it, the final proof of loss to bring us up to $50 million for the total for Hurricane Laura. So the total payment we've already received 24.5. This would, once this is approved, we could submit it to the insurance adjusters as a final proof of loss and get $25.5 million.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, I move approval of submission 2021-027, authorizing the proof of loss.
I would second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Lorenzi moves, Ms. McClary seconds submission 2021-27. Any discussion? Would it be good maybe to have Glenn update us on, because this kind of ties into his FEMA.
We certainly can.
This ties in, doesn't it, that once we get this proof of loss out of the way, it helps him move forward with the FEMA submissions, as I
Well,
appreciate it.
we've actually already received the final adjuster's report. This just is the trigger to allow for the final payment. But, I mean, we certainly, it's probably a great idea to have him do an update. But he has the final adjuster's report to give us the, to move through the FEMA process for our reimbursement. You want to hear from Glenn?
Yeah, I'd like Glenn to just kind of give us a quick briefing of where we are with the FEMA submissions.
Good evening. As Director Self just mentioned, we finally got the long-awaited final insurance adjusters report. And with your approval tonight, it'll bring the total of insurance money up to $50 million. Plus, since it's a total loss, they refund your $500,000 deductible. So of that money, of the $50 million, 500,000 or 46, just over 46 million is going to be attributed to damages. The remaining approximately 4 million was business interruption. So what that means is with the FEMA projects that we're putting through, they're going to subtract 46 million from the proceeds so as not to have duplication of benefits. So you'll get the insurance money, you'll get the FEMA money, and minus your 10% that's attributed to you for every client applicant that has to do it. So right now, we did receive the final insurance adjusters report recently. We hit the ground running, worked closely with the FEMA insurance manager, was able to come to an agreement with them on how we would like the funds deducted from each of the damaged buildings that's going through. It's to your benefit just to get most of it deducted early on so we don't have to worry about having to pay any back at the end if there's not enough. So we're going to hit it hard at the beginning. They're going to take a lot of deductions. We should hit that 46 million a lot sooner than later, and then they won't take any more insurance money out. Having received the final adjuster's report and with the agreement with FEMA insurance manager, we were able to push in 20 damaged inventory items totaling 4.6 million. There's another, looks like 10 items that are getting close to submission. They're a lot larger projects, include the ship loaders that you voted on earlier, and that total is another almost 51 million. So the entire, shortly in the next couple of weeks, we should have, if all goes correctly, 54 million in FEMA final review. They call it the CRC. Right now, it's taking at least 30 days for that to get back. Any projects over 30 or over $1 million will take a little longer than that. So hopefully, we can get some projects back next time of this month, if not the following month for sure. Any questions?
Glenn, thank you for sitting down with me extensively last week and walking me through all this. I appreciate it. I will tell the board that as of late Friday afternoon, this 20 projects that are now have been submitted to CRC was 10. So within one day, we doubled our submissions and raised, well, and that accounted for about $3 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, I spent Saturday here also.
Yeah. Good work. And one other item is that our executive director was asked by Congressman Higgins' office for a list of all projects, which is something that evidently he has done with all public entities in Southwest Louisiana, so that he has that should there be a problem getting our money from FEMA, our 90%. So I want to thank Congressman Higgins' office for reaching out. Glenn was very good about getting that to him Friday afternoon on fairly short notice. So I think we have a couple of bases between our outstanding legislative delegation fighting for us in Baton Rouge and our congressional, at least our local congressional representative doing that. And got Glenn, it's must be cross-eyed from looking at all these figures, but it definitely is a team effort, and I definitely appreciate it and very much.
Yeah, I have to give the credit to the management here. They've always had an open door policy for me, and phone calls, texts, and emails at all hours, and they've been wonderful to work with. I've really enjoyed this deployment.
Well, as I think our three senators and our lobbyists were here, it takes cooperation, and that's going to keep moving the ball forward. And so it's exciting, almost a year later, to see that the plan is working, and we're all working in the same direction. Definitely appreciate all of you, your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, submission 2021-027, we'll vote. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carried. Submission 2021-028, receiving and accepting the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2020.
Yes, sir. As part of the year-end financial close, we're required to have a financial statement audit performed. McElroy, Quirk & Burgess performed the audit. Jason Gilrery, one of the partners with McElroy, Quirk & Burgess here, and Cameron Landry, our Director of Finance and Administration, kind of oversaw that on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Jason Guillory. I'm the audit partner for McElroy, Quirk & Burgess on this audit. I'm here to report that we have concluded the audit of the financial statements for the calendar year ended December 31st, 2020, and we have included our independent auditor's report on page 21 of the comprehensive annual financial report prepared by management, and that report issues an unmodified opinion or clean opinion on your financial statements, saying that we attest to the financial statements fairly presenting the financial condition and position of the port as of December 31st, 2020. We have also issued a supplementary report and a second document, and that report is the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And I'm happy to report that we have no current year audit findings either for internal control matters or compliance matters. And so the audit went fairly well in a very different circumstances considering everything that went on financially with the 2020 year for the port. And I'm going to turn it over to Cameron to go through the financial summary, which is included in your comprehensive annual financial report.
Yes, sir. I'm just going to kind of walk through the comprehensive annual financial report. So it starts out with the introductory section, which includes the transmittal letter, an organizational chart, our GFOA Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for our CAFR last year, as well as a list of the principal officers, which is y'all and Mr. Ricky. Next would be the financial section, which, as Jason mentioned, includes the auditor's report, and they issued an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion we can receive. Following that's the management's discussion and analysis, which details the changes in operating revenues, operating expenses, non-operating revenues and expenses in that position from year to year, so 2019 compared to 2020. So on our balance sheet, the comparison of 2019 to 2020, we saw a decrease of about $4.1 million in total assets. Included in that, actually, current assets increased due to the insurance proceeds we received from our hurricane damages. On the opposite side of that, capital assets decreased because of hurricane write-offs due to the same reasons. Total liabilities increased significantly, and that's due to the recording of a contingent liability. And our ending net position was $246.1 million. On the statement of revenues and expenses, comparison 2019 versus 2020, we saw operating revenues decrease $4.1 million. That was due to a decrease in petroleum coke and barite tonnages due to the drop in oil prices caused by COVID, as well as hurricanes Laura and Delta. Total operating expenses also decreased, which you would expect to see when revenues decreased. That decreased about $2.9 million, and that was due to similar reasons. Lower petroleum coke, lower barite causes lower overall maintenance and operating expenses. Non-operating revenues decreased significantly, and that was due to multiple reasons. We recorded a net loss on the equipment write-offs that we had. That was offset by the insurance proceeds. And we also paid a higher amount to the Corps. And for the P3 that we pay into, as mentioned, we received that $5 million for the P3 from the state this past month. We also incurred $7.1 million in hurricane-related expenses. That's going to be partially offset in capital contributions, which is that accounts receivable we expect to receive the 90%. And we also recorded a claims payable for the contingent liability. And again, we ended net position at $246.1 million. Following that's the basic financial statements, which we kind of just went through, but they're laid out a little different. We have the statement of net positions, which is the balance sheet. We have the statement of revenues, expenses, changes in fund position, statement of cash flow. And we also have a new statement for a statement of fiduciary net position, which is for the Calcasieu River Fund, that P3 that we hold the money on behalf of. So that's included in there as well. Following the basic financial statements, you'll see notes to the financial statements, just highlights some accounting policies, explanations of certain calculations, things like that. And then we'll have supplementary information, a breakdown of OPEB and pension liabilities, shows our 2020 budget to actual comparison, things like that. And then following that is a statistical section, which is basically just tables and exhibits that supply the reader with a little bit more information of what's going on, where these numbers are coming from, things like that. So any questions? Thank you.
Any other questions for Cameron? I have some questions, Jason, if you don't mind. I guess the first thing in going through the comprehensive report on page 70, you refer to the fact that two customers account for 41% of our trade receivables. And when you prepare the statement of position, I assume that's adjusted for the uncollected.
Yes, sir. They're stated at net.
Yeah, you're just stating the net.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall how much the uncollected or doubtful receivables were?
It is $1.8 million. That's on page 54.
Okay.
It's $44,000 for property taxes, allowance for property taxes, and $1.8 million for allowance for accounts receivable.
Okay. And as part of your test, did you verify that proper procedures were followed for enforcement of collection and notice? And
Yes, sir.
okay. And while we're on the contracts, I know I've asked you this in prior years, how many and what dollar size contracts and agreements did you test for compliance with minimum annual guarantees and minimum terms?
We don't classify our testing toward minimum annual guarantee, but we select a sample. I think the sample is 10 to 15 contracts based on current new contracts and amendments to contracts. A lot of those deal with current year leases.
And you do it basically by dollar size? Is that how you identify the random selection?
For the most part, yes, but we also, when you look at the population of leases, yeah, we would look at some of the more substantial ones.
Okay. The other question, it deals with the contingent liabilities and the note on page 69. And in the bottom paragraph, you say you're basing the information as it stands and that the liability is neither probable or remote. And I know that sometimes accountants have different definitions for words than a layperson, so would you give me your definition of probable or remote?
So, you know, a probable would probably be in a percentage basis, you know, in a 90% range of happening. A remote may be less than 10%, and everything in the middle, I would say, is probably in this reasonably possible but unsettled stage. And I don't think that's per Jason Guillory's thought process. I don't think there's a specific percentage in accounting standards. Ricky, if you know of something, you can say. But generally, a probable outcome has a very strong sense of likelihood, with very few variables still in place.
So the number that you're recording is a contingent liability. How did you derive that?
Well, I want to make it clear that this is the port's financial statements, and the port made the distinguishment of what to book. I would consult with them on what numbers and walk through the process with them. So when you record a contingent liability and you get to that reasonably possible phase, what that means is that you're going to book the amount on the low end of the range and disclose the entire amount of the range up to the highest end of the range. And so if you had a flat range that said, you know, the attorney's best estimate, in this case, $40 to $50 million would be the low end, we could have booked $40 million and it would have been reasonable according with GAAP. But the other element of GASB and of generally accepted accounting principles that says if you have a best estimate, then to use the best estimate if that amount is more appropriate. In this case, the amount that was used was the amount submitted by the port's legal counsel's calculation of damages that was submitted to the court. So that was the number that management used and recorded on the financial statements of $48,723,150, which you can see also is in the $40 to $50 million range that the attorney gave us, but it's actually a little bit higher than what was probably required to be recorded. And as I mentioned, then also in the note disclosure on page 69, the full extent of the range of outcomes is also disclosed.
Right. So as a result of that, I guess our net expenses over revenues has increased by about 58 million to the negative.
Yes, sir.
And I guess a good example to reflect how that played into prior years would be your 10-year summary on pages 9 and 91.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other question I had, maybe this is for Cameron or possibly you can answer it, on page 76, as it relates to the other post-employment benefits, our percentage from 2019 to 2020 went from 66% of covered payroll to 93%. Is there an explanation for that?
Yeah, so what you have is you have a normal increase in this OPEB liability. This is related to retiree health insurance, and that is going to continue to grow up to a level. And so what that represents is that the OPEB liability increased from 5.3 million to 7.4 million, while the covered payroll actually decreased from 8.1 million to 7.9 million. So you just have a higher ratio of the net OPEB, the total OPEB liability, as compared to what that covered payroll is. Your covered payroll will probably go back up to 8.1 million. We don't know. The actuary determines the total OPEB liability on an annual basis, but that will probably go up as well next year.
And there wasn't a 10-year or, you know, a lot of the schedules you put in the
Right.
supplemental deal with 10 years, which gives you a good
Right.
window to look at.
This was
only 2 years.
Right,
You
right,
don't
right.
recall how it relates to previous
Well,
years.
it's a totally different, there was a new accounting pronouncement 2
Okay.
years ago called GASB 75, which changed the way we calculated the OPEB liability, so there are no comparable numbers.
So this is the
prior
starting point.
Right, so this is we're going to accumulate this data over the next 10 years. So we're just 2 years into the 10-year cycle.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's all the questions I have. Anyone else? And, motion accepting.
Move to accept submission 2021-028, the audited financial statements for December 31, 2000.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Lorenzi, seconded by Mr. Prudham to receive and accept the audited financial statement for December 31st, 2020, submission 2021028. Any further discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carried. Yeah, 2020. 2020. Okay, corrected. Okay, briefing notes, May 2021 financial briefing notes. Cameron?
Yes, sir. I'm going to go over the operating statement budget to actual comparison for the month ended May 31st, 2021. Operating revenues were $3 million, which is unfavorable to budget, about $300,000. That was due primarily to the timing of one of the Bayrite ships that we had budgeted, but it was mostly offset by higher raw coke than expected. That was the first time this year. Operating expenses were around $3.5 million, which is favorable to budget, about $400,000 for similar reasons, lower Bayrite, lower operating expenses, and partially offset by the higher raw coke. We also received a dividend check from Louisiana Workers' Compensation Corporation, so that helped the favorable. It offset some of our payroll expenses. Net non-operating revenues and expenses were around $200,000. That's unfavorable about $100,000, and that's due primarily to the continued lower interest rates. Port had EBITDA of about $700,000 and generated cash flow of around $900,000. On the balance sheet, unrestricted cash and investments decreased $16.8 million. That was due to the insurance reserve, property insurance payment, monies paid for hurricane recovery, and Calcasieu River Fund. Restricted cash increased $7.4 million. Again, that was due to the insurance reserve as well as the money we hold on behalf of the P3, the Calcasieu River Fund. Trades accounts receivable increased $4.9 million. And again, we actually issued the Calcasieu River Fund invoices for fiscal year 2022, technically. So that increased our receivable as well as the FEMA money that we expect to receive. Fixed assets increased $6.4 million. That was due to the completion of the mobile harbor crane. Construction in progress increased $500,000 due to multiple hurricane-related projects getting underway, the rehab of Berth 9, and it was largely offset by the completion of the mobile harbor crane. Current liabilities decreased $1 million due to the payment of hurricane-related payables, and long-term debt decreased $1.2 million due to the principal payment on the outstanding bonds. All other accounts did not change significantly. Any questions? Anything? Thank you.
Okay, the administration, finance, and security report. Cameron again.
Now that the audit is complete, we've began working on forecast 2. Hoping to see more positive outlook for the remainder of this year. Thanks to y'all's approval, we hope to receive the remaining insurance, $25.5 million soon. Get that over to Nick and spent. And that insurance report is also, as y'all know, going to help CSRS and FEMA get those projects pushed through and hopefully see that money as well. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Cameron.
Yes, sir.
Navigation, Channing.
Good evening, Commissioners. Two brief updates. The FY22, FY23 funding meeting we had scheduled with the Mississippi Valley Division of the Corps had to be rescheduled because of technical difficulties. So we're working on rescheduling that. The other item is the project partnership amendment that we have been working on, seems like forever. Finally got signed this past a couple of weeks ago. And it will allow the expansion of the disposal areas in Calcasieu Lake. We'll pick up 700 acres vertically. Horizontal, it's hard to tell because they keep getting rebuilt, but this is a big improvement in the disposal capacity that we'll have on the ship channel. That's all I have for an update. If anybody has any questions about what I just reported or about my report, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Operations, Todd?
For the past month in June, at City Docks, we had probably one of our largest lumber vessels that came in right at 32,000 cubic meters of lumber, 5 hydrate barges, and we finished up a USDA bagged rice shipment. Coming up, we've got a wind tower vessel. Should have about 60 towers on it. We have another liquid transfer for TDC and 2 cargo transfer vessels. At BT1, we loaded 2 calcine ships, 3 barges, a green coke ship, unloaded a rutile vessel, loaded 2 raw coke barges, and discharged a barite vessel. It was 54,000 short tons. That was 6 ships and 5 barges, right at 160,000 tons of cargo. Coming up, we've got notice today of 2 raw coke ships. Should be about 73,000 tons, and that's all coming from our side, which is the more revenue-rich side. We have a green coke ship, about 8,000 tons, a rutile ship that discharged about 12,000 tons, and a calcine vessel. So those 5 vessels and 4 barges will be around 100,000 tons. So hopefully all that happens. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions? I guess you kind of touched on Terrence's since he's not here. Or...
Yes, sir. If you have any questions about anything on Therence's, I'll answer that too. I know most of that stuff too. So.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Todd.
Yes, sir.
Engineering, maintenance, and development, Nick?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. We're continuing to progress on all projects, both hurricane-related and non, as well as ice storm-related. Of course, the big topic, though, was the submission you approved tonight for the purchase of our new pet coke ship loader and calcine ship loader. I want to just thank the contractors that submitted on those. They really worked with us and addressed all of our questions really as fast as they could, and so we look forward to getting those going. In addition, we've also just completed some more temporary repairs to assist Todd in the coke loading, doing some chute work and tripper modifications to try to expedite the temporary loading, try to cut back on expenses. Also, just an update from our last board meeting, the port priority application for berths 4, 5, and 6 was submitted, and we've got that in, and there have been no questions yet as of this time. So, and I'll be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
No questions. Thank you, Nick. Ginger and federal lobbyist report. Chuck, do you have anything you need to add? Okay, appreciate it. Any other matters that need to come before the board? If there's no other matters, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So move.
Second. Mr. Lorenzi moves. Mr. Prudham second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We'll be going into executive session.